Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chiseled. And why do we call it Chiseled? Because we're all work in progress. Again, my name is Rob Commodari. I'm your host. I'm also the author of Better Than You Think, and recently I co-authored with 40 other authors the book Next Level Your Life. But today's not about me. It's about Michael Schiff. Michael Schiff's a friend of mine. We've crossed paths over the last 18 years in real estate. He is of local flavor in the Baltimore area, which I'm loving. And it's not often I get the chance to talk to somebody or interview somebody from the local area. So Mike's been in the business for 18 years. He's got a team, the Shift Home Team, correct? Got that right?
That's correct. Yes.
The Shift Home Team, 15 agents and 4 admin, has had unbelievable success in his business. Michael, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Rob. It's an honor to be on and have me as a guest.
Thank you for being here. So, Michael, you've had a journey. You've been on a journey, and it all dates back to what we talked about a little while ago. When you're about 3.5 years old, had a lot of setbacks, had some ups and downs, but you pulled yourself out of it, and it's going to be awesome for you to share this with everybody today, and then to lead us where you are right now in your business to the philanthropy you're involved in. So, Michael, thank you for being here, and please share with us what happened way back when you were 3.5 years old.
Yeah, so I'm just a very big believer that the things that we have gone through in our past are for a reason, and many of us have had trauma growing up. We've had different dysfunctions that happened to us as a kid, as an adolescent, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to share some of those examples with you and the listeners of what personally impacted me, and it's going to require a high level of vulnerability. But I truly believe as we become more vulnerable and just authentic with ourselves and with others, that's where the value is. That's where I've learned from so many others. And I've learned to be able to compare inside instead of comparing out. So that being said, as a young kid, as 3.5 years old, as I shared with you previously, Rob, I was in an accident that involved a Lego. It was actually in a Construx, which was a toy similar to Legos. For the babies that were not born in the early 80s, they may not know Construx. For the listeners out there that remember Construx, it was a toy sword. And my brother and I were playing on a playground set, and we made elastic bands and we shot them off as like flying swords. And unfortunately, one went into my left eye. It was a freak accident. And at 3.5 years old, I ended up losing the sight and color of my left eye.
That's crazy. And then so at 3.5 years old, you've lost your eye. And I guess, like, how do you deal with it at 3.5 years old? Because you really haven't even experienced the world yet. So how did that hit you?
It was very tough. And I'm very blessed to have, like, my mom and dad at the time did everything they could with what they had to make sure I got the best medical help and attention at that time. Went through many eye surgeries at that age, and would do a lot of rehab. I remember my mom doing drills and exercise with me. She would hold up a M&M, and if I got the color right, I was allowed to eat it. And I was really, really trying to get my sight back. And doctors recommended these types of exercises. But needless to say, the damage was done, and it was very tiring to, troublesome to be able to restore the sight. So it was tough to deal. It got really tough in like elementary school when, we get to that age where kids start to tease you and make fun of you. I mean, I wore really big glasses, plastic glasses, before they became trendy to wear cool, big plastic glasses. In the early 80s, I had these big frames at 5, 6, 7 years old. And I would get teased. They would call me names. And, I had a physical disability, and many of us out there can relate to having a physical disability with our appearance that we got teased about. And there's no worse or better place than elementary school and middle school to get teased. So they would call me names, freak and one-eye Willie and Cyclops, retard, things like that definitely impacted my self-esteem and my self-worth at that time.
So you went through that for, if I remember correctly, you told me about maybe 8, 9, 10 years you were going through all this this back and forth with this low self-esteem, this people ridiculing you, making fun of you. And was there a time when you said, you know what, I do have a low self-esteem, or did you not even know what a low self-esteem was?
Yeah, at that time, remember thinking that something was wrong with me and I felt different. And I probably didn't know what self-esteem was at that time, but I just started to feel different. And as a result of like feeling different, I started to act out to feel a part of. And that led me to, by the age of 12, 13 years old, finding the crowd and the clique that would accept me for who I was at that time. And that in turn led to the use of drugs and alcohol. Those were the folks that were like willing to accept me and that I felt more comfortable with. With a physical disability, my parents enrolled me in sports and I played sports and I enjoyed playing them. But I had some limitations as baseball. Batting, I had no sight coming in from my left eye, so I had to really like turn my head all the way around in order to play. So needless to say, I was also limited on some physical sports that I can play because of the fear of losing sight in the other eye and then being permanently or completely blind. So I gravitated to, the druggies, if you will. In 1995, 96, these were the folks that were wearing tie-dye shirts, which are back in style, corduroy pants, Jenkos, chain belts, that little clique that I found my way into through rollerblading and skateboarding.
So now you got a click, you got somebody to grasp onto you, they're attracted to you, and now you're drinking and drugs, but you got into a little bit of trouble, you had told me.
Yeah.
You acted out with the drinking, but it sounds like it led to a little more than just drinking.
It did. It did. So the consequences of using drugs escalated fairly quickly. Even before the drugs, I was a troublesome kid. I got arrested for shoplifting in sixth grade. In seventh grade, I got arrested for destruction of property. And then after that, that's when really the drug use started to set in. Where in eighth grade, I was carried out of my middle school in handcuffs for bringing weed to school, and I got expelled from middle school for that.
So go ahead.
Yeah, which was really mind blowing at the time, because you think an eighth grader, 13, 14 years old. So I had to finish my eighth grade year through homeschooling.
Now, so you got in trouble there. You got. I think you told me you got arrested sixth, seventh, and eighth grades, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Sixth, seventh, and eighth, and ninth and 10th. So combined, it was about 6 times before I was 15. Before I was 16, rather. 6 times before I was 16, I got arrested.
Well, so in a joking way, does that get you into the Hall of Fame for getting arrested?
Right. If there is one out there, my face is somewhere up there.
We don't want to be in that Hall of Fame, right?
No.
I know you don't mind me joking here.
Right. Absolutely not. But that was the direction I was going. I literally could have been in the Hall of Fame of criminals because of the direction and the guidance that I had. And we talk a lot about mentors and coaches and role models. And at that time, like, you can have a coach and a mentor and a role model that is not of a positive influence. And I just had negative influences in my life that were controlling, how I was developing and turning out.
So then you get into high school. You said you got arrested in high school. So you got in high school and you got expelled, I think, in the 10th grade, and you ended up at the Charles Hickey School, I think you told me.
Yes. Yeah. So that is here in our good, state of Maryland. So after a couple fake IDs and violations of probation and another marijuana and ecstasy possession charge, that led me to a violation of probation, which ultimately led me to 60 days at the Charles Hickey School in Maryland, which is a juvenile detention center.
And before that, and if I could bring this up, you had a good buddy. You and a friend of yours did a lot together, and something happened there, and I think also contributed to some of this acting out.
So on the path that we were on, we would do a lot of crazy stuff. A lot of stuff that I'm very ashamed of saying, down to like, passing fake checks and, breaking into houses. And we started to joyride cars, right? So we were joyriding our parents' cars. And what that looked like is when our parents went to sleep, we would take the keys and then we would go pick each other up at 14 years old. And one night, my good friend, he was like a brother to me. He lived with me for a period of time when he was having problems at his house. We were in rehab together as well. He came, he was back home living with his mom, and he was coming to pick me up. And this is before we had cell phones, and we might have had pagers, but like, no, we were 14 years old. We weren't using pagers just yet. So, you would make a phone call and say, I'll be there in 15 minutes. And then you would go outside and meet at the spot. So I got that call. I went outside and I waited 15 minutes. I waited an hour, I waited 2 hours, and Stevie didn't come to pick me up. And at this point, it's probably 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm just realizing like something's going on. I'm just going to go home, go back to bed. He's not coming. I go home, I go back to bed. And at 6 o'clock that next morning, my mom wakes me up and she says that she had some bad news to share with me. She wanted to make sure I was up. She told me that my best friend, Stephen Laurie, died last night in a car accident. And at that time, I get emotional talking about that currently still today because, it is just something that I never would have thought, what we were doing could result in such a travesty and consequence, which, was eye-opening to the direction that, where we were going in our lives. We're from a, good middle-class family in a decent neighborhood, and things didn't like that didn't happen. Right. So it was my first experience with death, and death of a friend and a loved one that really created a new sense of emotions that I wasn't familiar with dealing with, and I didn't have the right tools to deal with, that ultimately led to my addiction progressing into stronger and harder drugs.
Yeah, because you'd been to rehab, in and out of rehab already prior to that, correct?
Prior to that, I was already in and out of rehab, and I was actually on the right path of getting clean and staying clean. I was going to meetings at that time, but I was not prepared. I didn't have the tools as I do today to deal with what I went through at that time.
Yeah, so even though somebody goes through rehab and you think they might be, straightening themselves out, there's always the potential of a trigger to set you back.
There is. And that's why it's so important to, a lot of people want to do it like white knuckle it, or we call it a dry drunk sometimes. And they can abstain from drinking or using drugs on their own without recovery, without a sponsor, or without some sort of program. And it's just, it's a slippery slope, because there will come a time where something comes up. That we need to be able to have somebody to call to deal with, whatever emotional, whether it's a good thing or bad thing, whatever we're going through. And in the absence of that, we're playing with fire.
Yeah, literally, right? Literally speaking.
Right. Yep.
So you get through Charles Hickey School. How long were you there?
I was there 60 days, and then followed by another 60 days in an inpatient rehab center in Cumberland, Maryland.
And so you straighten yourself out again, and then you had the was it the root canal? Was that before?
Yeah. So leading to that, after I finished my 60 days in Hickey and then another 60 days at the rehab center, with 120 days clean, I ended up coming home, and my parents refused to send me back to high school. In fact, I was expelled from the arrest that was 120 days prior. And we started looking at military academies. And those are 3 words that you don't want to hear as a teenager, is that, you're going to military school. So I was very reluctant in wanting to, go and look at military schools. But I also realized that the path that I was going down, I needed some change, and I needed some different structure in my life. So I decided to make the decision to go to Massanutten Military Academy in Woodstock, Virginia. And that was one of the greatest decisions that I was able to make for myself. I couldn't see it at the time. This is one of the things that you're in the moment and you can't see at the time that it's going to be good for you, but you go out on that leap of faith and you just, trust the process of what's going on. So doing that, I ended up starting 11th grade there. I enrolled into football. And I hadn't played sports prior to that. I mentioned I was using drugs, and now I put on some weight when I was in Hickey. I went in Hickey at 135 pounds. I left 185 pounds. I literally put on 50 pounds in a 120-day period, just from eating good and working out and doing push-ups. So I had some mass. I had some confidence to me that was something that I wasn't familiar with before. So I decided to enroll in football. And that was great. It taught me camaraderie. It taught me sportsmanship. And the other thing it did, it brought up one of my first coaches in my life, John Dutton. Coach Dutton was the first experience that I had with a coach. And this happened to be our head football coach. And he just took such pride in the men and the boys that he was working with. I mean, you got to imagine, these are kids that are probably coming from their high schools. They got expelled from high school, so they're here. They either came from a state-run facility. There's probably maybe 10 or 15% that actually want to go into the military, that are going to military school. But the other 80, 85% are juvenile delinquents, we'll call it that.
Right.
So he had a job on his hands to be able to provide the structure to these young men in order to help be that guiding light. He was a father figure to me. He was a father figure to many of the other guys. And just shout out to Coach Dutton. If it wasn't for him, like, he really taught me that relationship between coach and coachee.
So John Dutton was coaching. It wasn't the John Dutton from the Colts, was it? There was
no, not the John Dutton from the Colts. This was another John Dutton. He could have coached the Colts. However, he was actually a Packers fan, big Green Bay Packers fan.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So that led you into a leadership role, correct?
It did, yes. So I quickly escalated through the ranks of the military school, where after my first year of military school, I was promoted to the battalion commander. So you get to school, you start off as a private, then you get it to sergeant, corporal, sergeant, first class, first sergeant, lieutenant, captain. And I ultimately made my way up to the battalion commander, which was meant that I had control and leadership over all 250 Corps of Cadets, which was a really big honor at that time. When I came back from my senior year for football, I became the captain of the football team. So I started getting these like leadership opportunities. So at this point, I had 15, 16, 17 months clean, and I was doing the right thing. The military schools taught me structure and organization and responsibility that I didn't have before, that I, take into my day today. I make my bed every day because of what I've learned in military school. I keep my shoes, shine because of military school. Like certain things like that I've learned over the years have carried over. But it was, these leadership roles that came up. However, to get to your point, as far as like this root canal, as a result of a football injury, I needed a root canal. And by 18, 19 months clean, I admittedly stopped going to meetings. I stopped working a program, and I stopped calling my sponsor at the time. And as a result, when I got this root canal, I thought it would be a good idea to double up on my meds, what the nurse would dispense out, and save them all for a Friday night. And by doing so, I literally abused my pain medicine, and I released my addiction all over again. So I went from having 19 months clean between 15 and 17 to now relapsing my senior year of high school when I was in military school. Now, it was a one-time slip up, and I didn't go back to it after that. But at the same time, it unwoke the beast inside. And by my graduation night, all the guys were drinking in the barracks, and I thought, entitled to be able to have a drink for graduating high school and get drunk like everybody else. And I ended up doing that, and that ultimately resulted in immediate consequences for me from the school because, as the battalion commander, I wasn't supposed to be drinking.
So you've had your ups and downs, and I think in that process, looking back, Mike, were you able to give yourself some grace and forgive yourself when these things happened?
Looking back, I was always very hard on myself at that time, during these processes. So, as I look back now, I can give myself grace, but in the moment, I was just always so hard. I always would get frustrated with myself, and that frustration would just lead to me feeling worse about myself and wanting to progress and act out in different ways. And I feel as though if I was able to be a little bit easier on myself, that could have been better.
Yeah. I want to, on a lighter note, I just want to say, when I see Mike out at Battle Hard real estate functions, now I know why he's always dressed so sharp.
That's it. Kind of, shirts tucked in, gig line tight, hair tight,
Yeah.
kind of what I learned. So
Sport coat or suit and tie. He's always dressed to the nines, man. I love it. So good stuff. Now I know why. So thank you for sharing that part of it.
Absolutely.
So you got into college and you had some trouble down there. You went to University of Florida as well, correct?
Yeah, University of Florida. So I got a new sense of freedom back, and I did my first year at Villa Julie here in Baltimore, and then which then becomes Stevenson University. I went to visit a friend that was going to UF in Gainesville for the weekend just to see what it was like. And, if anybody has gone to a 4-year, university like Gainesville, it's a lot of fun, right? So after that, I ended up transferring in, but I'll share that I had to transfer into the community college locally nearby. It was Santa Fe Community College. I did my sophomore year there, and then I transferred into University of Florida my junior year. So my degree and diplomas from University of Florida. But I share that to say because there's some folks that may not have gotten into their university of choice initially, but there's ways of transferring in and still getting your degree and graduating from that 4-year accredited university.
Yeah.
But Florida brought a whole new sense of freedom and also consequences with that freedom because I wasn't quite prepared and ready for that yet.
Yeah. So then you again got a little bit of trouble down there, but now let's fast forward because we've been talking about the dark side, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about the light side, the good stuff, right? Let's get into that. So you leave Florida and you get what year did you graduate? I'm sorry, Mike.
I graduated in 2004. And the only dark side I'll say from Florida, just to fast forward it, because there's a lot of stories and we could talk forever, is that, I started using drugs again and drinking. And ultimately it led to 3 more arrests. And it was March of 2003. March of 2004, I was sentenced to a year and a day in prison as a senior in college.
So it was that. So I'm glad you brought that up. Forgive me for skipping that part because was that the low point of your life right there?
That was the low point. Yeah. So I just want to touch on that because that was the absolute low point. I'm in recovery now and I'm clean and sober, and I've been clean and sober since November 18th, 2003.
That's amazing. Congratulations. Yep. Do you have your coin? Did you have
I have my coin. I have my medallion.
So
19 and a half years clean and sober. That was my clean date, but all the wreckage from that past showed up on March 1st, 2004, where I had to go to court for all my violations of probations. And ultimately that led to the judge sentencing me to a year and a day in prison. I was studying business management and criminology. I thought I'd be a smart ass and try to represent myself as an attorney and hope for the best. And the judge didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to hear that I took the LSATs and I was planning to go to law school. In fact, he said, "Mr. Schiff, you have no business and no right to practice law in any courtroom," and literally slammed the gavel and said a year and a day. By the grace of God, I only ended up doing 19 days of that year and a day. But that was still that led to that turning point in my life. I went into jail ready to take responsibility for my actions. Even though I had about 5-6 months clean, I was still ready to take responsibility for my actions. And I said, you know what, God, this is your will, not mine. If this is what you feel is best for me, I'm ready to pay my dues. This is not the life I want to live anymore. I'm ready to move, past this. I was going to meetings again at that time, and I started to, build my recovery network. After some praying, after submitting an appeal for modifications of sentencing, I was able to get out in 19 days. And I knew that was my last second chance. I mean, this was beyond second, but this was my last chance of doing anything with my life, going back into the system and back into jail and the bookings constantly. I just knew I wanted a better life for myself. And I just kept on seeing some of the repeat habitual offenders in there. And I started looking around. I was like, if I don't make any changes, this is going to be me too.
Yeah.
So I knew at that point, it was a turning point that I had to start making some changes.
Yes, that's like they call it the old Popeye moment. That's all I can stand. I can't stand it no more. is that what happened?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. So have you always been a faithful man or faith believing guy? Have you always been that?
Yeah, I have. A lot of my prayers in the beginning were like foxhole prayers. So it was like, God, get me out of this jam and I'll never do that again. Right. And God heard those prayers, and he, helped get me out, because he's, I got my wrist slapped, so many times, and I was able to get away with my charm and charisma. But I didn't change my behavior.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, like, as this didn't happen to me, this happened for me.
Right.
And this was God showing up in my life and doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I was on a road of destruction and death, Rob. Like, that's the direction I was going. I'm here to tell you, I've buried well over 50 friends and acquaintances personally in recovery. Many of them very close to me growing up as a result of overdoses, and dying from this disease.
Wow, I did not know that. 50 close friends or family members.
Close, yes.
Oh
So,
my God.
and I was no different than them, and I was on that path. And the drugs I was using, OxyContin, which many people are familiar with, is a highly physically addicting drug. And as soon as that was removed from the market, a lot of folks switched to heroin, and I would have been right behind everybody in that cycle.
You consider yourself lucky right now?
Extremely lucky, extremely fortunate. So much so, like, it is on my shoulder every day to pay it forward to the next person.
And how do you pay it forward? How do you do that?
So that kind of led me into, like, graduating Florida. That was one of the top 5 moments in my life. I never thought that day would come when I was sitting in that cell. I thought I'll never graduate. Nothing would be possible. Even if I do get out of here, I'm going to have a felony on my record, and who would want to hire me? And my life is over. And I'm here to talk to the listeners. If anybody has gone through anything like that, or may have had like some sort of background or record, anything is possible. So when I graduated, I graduated, happiest day, one of the happiest days of my life. Still had that felony on my record, but I started looking into what can I do that will that to remove this, to get it expunged, as we know. And I went through the process. I contacted an attorney when I came back to Maryland, and I wrote a letter to the judge, and which it took about a year, but he did read the letter. He saw that I was doing the right thing. And after completing my probation, after probably about a year and a half, they were able to remove that conviction of guilt, and the felony was removed from my record. All that was going on when I was getting my real estate license in 2004. So I took the real estate exam in December of 2004. It became licensed at the end of that year. And I remember I was applying for my first brokerage to work for. It was a company named Zip Realty. And if many people remember Zip was the first kind of like cloud-based or virtual brokerage. Many people work from home, and they had this technology platform that you work from. And I remember going to training in Atlanta for 7 days and learning the platform, and coming back to a FedEx on my doorstep that basically said that after a thorough background check, you are no longer employed with our company or terminated from the company as an independent contractor. And it was a little discouraging because, here I am, I'm figuring I got a little bit over a year clean. I'm trying to do the right thing. And, I have a little, a speed bump in my way that's blocking me from getting to where I want to go. I didn't stop there. I went for that. I was appealing the conviction at that time. And I found a brokerage that was referred to me from a family friend that was willing to take me under their wing. And I share this to say that, nobody succeeds alone. There's always somebody there that will help you. And this goes into me helping others. There was somebody there for me when I needed them. And that person is Vito Simone. So Vito ran a small real estate brokerage, Simone Real Estate, kind of a boutique brokerage. And, he walked me down to the commissioner's office, and he basically said that he would, be able to look over me and mentor me, and I would work under his kind of, guidance and make sure that I stayed in line. And I had this probationary period with the commission that I needed to abide by in order to, fully get my license and be on my own. So shout out to Vito on that.
So Vito was a godsend as well, right?
Vito was a godsend. So
John Dutton and Vito.
Yeah, that's it. So as these things started to, happen, I realized it started to build my faith. So those foxhole prayers then became like, all right, well, let me follow through with action. It's not just praying and hoping, right? It's praying and actually doing the next right thing. doing the next right thing was my motto for years and still is. Like, no matter what you do, just do the next right thing. Put one foot in
Yeah.
front of the other. And, that resulted into wanting to pay it forward to the next person. So as I began to build my team, the business of 5, 6, 7, we were both in that business together. Crazy times, very reminiscent of the past market that we're coming out of, and the market that we're actually coming into right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And built a business as a single agent at that time. And in 2011, those first 7 years in the business, I decided to build a team. And in 2011, I ended up attending a seminar and like hearing about the business side of real estate and how there's a model to build a team and all this good stuff. And that gave me the platform and the ability to start pulling people up with me. So a lot of my hires on my team, whether they're still here or they've moved on and started building their own teams, have been people like me, people that needed a second chance, people that needed somebody to believe in them, and until they could believe in themselves. And they may have had some troublesome background, and I've written letters for them on their behalf the same way Vito was there for me. And that is the stuff that like makes me tick and it makes me happy.
So you're involved in a lot of personal growth and develop these days, right? And I think you said that it evolved from one of the seminars you went to. How do you use that with your team, with other individuals? Do you, hey, read this, study this, or you take them through it with you? How do you work with that?
There's definitely some staples into personal growth that we've read together as a team. Just starting with How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's just a staple of being a good person and of self-development. How Think and Grow Rich is another one that we've read together as a team, just like, staples in that sense. And then there's stuff that I've learned over the years that I've shared. A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle is one of my favorite books that, just talks a lot about ego and just, if anybody is going through it. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday as well is another one that I have, it helped me so much. And I'm so quick to refer to people that I feel like could benefit from it as well. And I feel as though these lessons, like sometimes the first time I remember hearing some of this stuff that was on the personal development side, I didn't realize, originated from some of the, Jim Rohns and Zig Ziglar's and Tony Robbins. I thought this was like original content that was being spoken to me from the people that I heard it from first. And as I started going on this path of self-development, I'm like, this stuff, there existed before, and it's different ways of, getting it out. But, as we are in our team meetings, as we're on our power ups, we're constantly, thinking about, that conversation of self-development.
Yeah. So as a faith-based man, how has God worked his way into this personal growth? Because we use the word self-development or self-help. And I believe, and I think you'd agree with me, it's not about self, because there's got to be somebody else along for the ride or helping us, because we're on his ride. I would agree.
Yeah.
So how has God worked his way into all this for you?
Yeah. It's just a lot of faith and trust and turning it over. One of the things I say to myself is, I want to turn my will over to the care of God and let it be his will and not mine. So there's, before, certain events or situations, like, I've learned not to take the things personally, and that like God hasn't brought me here to just leave me here. And that's just developed, a lot of faith. And in our organization, in our team, we don't, we're not talking faith as much per se, but I'm truly believe that, God is present in our organization and has done some amazing things with our team and with myself personally that there was no way I would be able to do on my own.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'll ask this question. How do you discern if it's his will or your will? How do you discern the difference?
That's a good question. Usually so my will is going to lead to some sort of consequence or I guess result or outcome that is not going to be as desirable. So for example, I'll give it to like you know I like to, so I'm an addict and I like to still, do certain things. I just don't drink or use drugs, but like every now and then I'll go to the casino, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it will be Friday night and it's like late at night and I'm probably tired. I probably should make a left and go home. But instead I make a right and I said, I'm going to go to the casino.
Uh-huh.
Those are the nights I don't win at the casino. Those are the nights that I usually come home a loser because I should have followed God's will and went home because I was tired.
Yeah.
No, but like on a more serious note, like,
That's great.
yeah, it's the things that like is doing good when I'm doing good, when I'm in the moment of helping and not, being self-centered and coming from myself. If it's a self-centered interest, it's probably my will. And if I am, selflessly helping others or doing for others, it's most likely God's will.
Yeah. Do you get a feeling? Do you hear a voice? Do you get a sense? How do you know he's talking to you in that moment?
Yeah. It's if I have to doubt it or question it, then I know I'm trying to manipulate the situation, for that. But there's definitely signs out there. And I'm a big, sometimes it can take me forever to make decisions or I get stuck because I'm waiting for that like sign. Right.
Yeah.
And it was there all along and I just completely like missed it. And it's similar, to the story that's the man, that is deserted on an island and he's praying for God to help him. And a boat comes by and he says, no, 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 I'm going to wait for God. And then, a helicopter comes by and he's like, no, 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 I'm going to wait for God. And, ultimately he dies and he goes to heaven. He's like, well, God, I was praying for you. What happened? He's like, well, I sent the boat. I sent the plane. I sent the helicopter. Right.
Yeah.
So it's being open to like being able to be, in touch and seeing those signs, whatever that may look like. And being able to trust your gut and not being, afraid to fail as well. I mean, failure is a big part of my story. And as we hear so often, it's, the bigger the failure, sometimes the bigger the success. And it's just a result of not giving up. There's many times in my story from my past life, I'll say, and from my current life that I could have stopped and not given up. But I made the decision to get up out of bed and and put on my pants, put on my shoes and, and go out the door and make it into the office.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you gotta keep going.
No. So, it's, we got to, it's a decision and a choice to not stop and to continue going, even when we don't want to, that's what will help get us out of certain ruts.
Yeah, so you've been through those ups and downs, and you faced that resistance. And Mike Schiff is a highly successful real estate agent right now with a great team. And we cross markets every now and then. We don't like compete a lot, but I'm proud to call Mike a friend because whenever we see each other, it's always a hug, a hand, knuckle, whatever you want to call it, high five, whatever. And I always love sharing a conversation with Mike because he's inspirational to me. And I don't know if he's ever heard me say that, but he just heard me say it now. And it's great to know a guy like Mike. And he's successful in real estate, and in turn now you've decided to do a little bit of give back. Is that correct?
Yes. So as a real estate team, kind of reached that point where we kind of hit that, we've sold 350 houses in a year. We sold 100 million plus in real estate year over year. And we enjoy doing that. We want to continue to do that. We have a lot of people on the team. Like I value and judge my success around who on the team is having success. We want all members of the team earning six figures or more, and then ultimately to create millionaires with inside the team. But in addition to that, as we have that on a nice little system and that's working really nicely, I started to branch out, and it's always been something that's been on my heart, is getting into the recovery housing space. And I thought like being in real estate and being in recovery, like bringing those two worlds together, I have a wealth of knowledge and resource from both sides to bring together to create a space where it's such a needed opportunity and inside of what we're experiencing here in Maryland, and I would venture to say in other areas, drug addiction and alcoholism is real, and there's just such a big need right now. And sometimes there's no place where folks know where to go for help, or after they get help into rehab or detox, where do they go afterwards until they can integrate back into their homes, and providing a transitional home that has structure and has the ability to get people back on their feet and get them, into different vocational classes and skills and interviews so they can get jobs and actually, help turn these, men and women into productive members of society again.
And you created this housing program you were telling me.
Yes. So that's the recovery housing program that I'm involved in now. And, we're looking to just, add more beds to the Baltimore metro marketplace here in order to serve the well-needed, population that we have going on. In addition to that, we started the Repair Network with my good friend Randy Lusk. We started Real Estate Professionals Active in Recovery. This is a private Facebook group for anybody out there that is a real estate professional. So that could be a realtor, mortgage lender, insurance contractor, investor that wants to be around other people that are active in recovery. It's a private Facebook group that we share our experiences with, our celebrations, wins, and go for additional support that are within our industry. So that's another project that has come to life over the past year.
Man, that's great. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I say unfortunately, I'm not a part of that Facebook group, right? but
yep.
but that's great, man. And thank you for doing that for others, man. That's I had no idea about that. So, Mike, let me ask you this: you highly successful. You've been through the ringer a few times, self-sabotage, right?
Yep.
But you've come out of that. When I see Mike walking on the streets, when I see Mike in the real estate, I see a confident Mike. I see it's an energetic Mike, a magnetic Mike. That's what I see, right? Does Mike ever struggle with that self-esteem issue anymore?
There are some times that there is some self-doubt. Like, I want to just be raw and transparent. And I work on that. I have a personal development coach that I work with today still to help get through to that next level, because I realize, like, there's some things that I hit ceilings on and I get blocked. And, as on the outside, I can look and feel confident, like down inside, like there's some things that I still, struggle with as well. That it is constantly a work in progress. So, if I am ever thinking that I have it figured out, like, I'm probably in a bad space. So yeah, I mean, it is, it's something, but it's come a long way. I feel the difference. I feel the progression of from where I am now versus where I was when I started. And it's a completely, almost 180-degree difference.
That's great. But I think the point to make for everybody listening is that you go through a tough time, you come out of it, and you had to lose self-esteem and you're confident. Doesn't mean you're never going to have a low self-worth moment or a low self-esteem moment. That's like the devil rearing its ugly head, just trying to bring you down. So we're all going to face that no matter what successes we have, no matter what we've overcome. And we have to realize that I don't think it ever goes away, because we all have our vices and it doesn't ever go away. You just got to manage it. You got to manage it when it rears its ugly head. And I'd assume it rears its head. Like you said, you have these doubts from time to time and you've learned to manage it and you have somebody to lean into, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And having faith. So again, like, when those doubts would come, it's faith more even so than a personal coach, is like knowing, like, I'll say to myself, like, I know God didn't, bring me this far to leave me here. Right. And
Exactly.
that there's a bigger plan. And I constantly will say to myself, why is this happening for me instead of why is this happening to me? And that little switch in our mindset can get us, can take us out of any rut and give us a different way to think about it.
Yeah, you're right. Because you hear so many people saying, why me? Why me? Why is it happening to me? But it's happening for us, so we learn something. Mike, before I let you go here, I always ask everybody this last question. How much more chiseling do you got going on in your life with God?
Yeah. I got a lot more to go. It's a relationship, and it's a constant journey. And the more I get into the relationship, the more I want more of. So it's a constant development and just, routine to get in and to stay in. So again, is if I figure it out and I think that I'm done, then there's issues. So it's constantly it's staying in faith, it's staying plugged in, staying connected, and, being able to be grateful, be humble, and give God all the glory.
That's awesome, man. I don't know if there was a better way to finish this podcast up with that. So, Mike, thanks a lot for being on the show today. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you in the Baltimore area, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So Instagram is popular, and that's always a good way to reach me. And that would be at Michael Schiff, and that's SCHIFF.
Okay. And then if anybody that's gone through these struggles wants to get in that Facebook group, do you want to share what that group is?
It's called Repair, REPAIR, and it's real estate professionals active in recovery.
That's great. Well, Mike, we're going to finish on that note. I am blessed that you were able to share your story with us, your vulnerability, your authenticity. It's people need to hear these stories. People need to know that if you think you're down and out, there's a way out. And you've shared that with us today, and I couldn't be more grateful for you than that.
It's my pleasure, Rob. Thank you very much.
You got it, buddy. Look forward to see you again with that shirt and tie on, buddy, and sporting them shiny shoes. So until next time, everybody, let's go get chiseled.